Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a YouTube video that's been making the rounds, and, well, the title is something else. It's called Tucker Carlson Finds Out His Driver is Homeless. What He Does Next Will Melt Your Heart.
Yeah, and my first thought was, okay, here we go, another one of those celebrity feel-good stories.
Yeah.
But when you actually look closer, it gets kind of complicated.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's not just a simple act of kindness,
Right.
right? There's this whole layer of like social dynamics. And then there are all these questions about how we see homelessness and even some moral philosophy thrown in there.
Exactly. So, okay, picture this. Tucker Carlson, he's in his car, probably on his way to work or from work, who knows, and he sees this bag on the passenger seat.
Not like a briefcase or anything, right? Like a bag with personal stuff in it. And then it hits him. This is his driver's bag.
Right. And then the video, it tells us that this driver, a guy in his late 50s, is homeless. He's been sleeping in his car for a month while he's working as Tucker's driver.
And that's huge. Like it totally challenges that stereotype of what we think a homeless person looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Here's this guy, he's got a job, he's wearing a uniform, trying to, keep things normal. But the reality is he doesn't have a place to live.
The video really shows how much the driver didn't want to talk about his struggles. Like he's embarrassed, he doesn't want to burden his kids who live in other states, and he's worried about what people will think.
And this is where the whole power dynamic between Tucker and the driver, it just gets super interesting. You got this big media figure, right? And then you've got this guy who's basically, working for him. So it makes you wonder, did that power dynamic, did that make the driver hesitate even more to accept help?
Absolutely. The driver even says something like, "People see a driver, not a person." That's a powerful statement.
It really is. And then you've got Tucker's response. Instead of just saying, some empty words, he actually does something. Right then and there, he calls a friend, and within minutes, he's found an apartment for the driver.
And he sends him enough money for 6 months of rent.
Now, don't get me wrong, that's really generous of him. But it makes you think, right, is this real compassion from Tucker? Or is there some guilt in there? Is he trying to make himself feel better because he's benefiting from the driver's struggles?
Yeah. And the video, it lays out the driver's whole backstory. Like he lost his wife to cancer a year ago, and the medical bills, they just wiped out their savings. He lost his apartment, and with his kids so far away, he had nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's a story you hear way too often. It just shows how quickly things can fall apart, how someone can end up on the streets, like an illness, losing your job, some crazy expense.
Hmm.
It can happen to any of us.
And it feels like the video is using that part of the story to tug at our heartstrings, to get us to feel for the driver.
For sure. But it also highlights, how much stigma there is around being homeless. Like the driver didn't want to tell his kids because he didn't want them to see him as a failure. And that says a lot about how we as a society look at people experiencing homelessness.
So when Tucker tells the driver about the apartment and the money, the driver is just floored. He doesn't want to take it at first, says he doesn't take handouts.
And Tucker's response is pretty interesting. He says something like, this isn't a handout. I'm making sure a hardworking man has a place to live. He spins it as an investment, not charity.
Which brings up another layer to this whole thing, this idea of who deserves help, right? Like who gets to decide that and based on what?
Yeah, that's a really complicated question that goes way beyond just this one story.
Definitely. And there's another part of this that I think we got to talk about. Tucker, he's really insistent that the driver pays it forward when he's back on his feet.
Right, right. That whole pay it forward thing, it's like a staple in these stories. But it does raise some big questions. It's almost like by saying pay it forward, Tucker's saying the driver owes him something. Not money, but morally.
And that makes you think, right? Is it enough to just accept help? Or do you got to pay it back, like do something nice for someone else?
It's a cool idea, this whole chain of generosity. But it could also be a problem, right? What if someone can't pay it forward? What if things don't get better for them like they did for the driver? Does that mean they didn't deserve the help in the first place?
Whoa. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it makes you wonder, could this pay it forward thing actually make people feel pressured or even guilty?
Exactly. And it's important to remember, everyone's different, right? Not everyone's going to have the same chances or resources to help other people.
And shouldn't we be focusing on creating a society where everyone has the support they need instead of relying on random acts of kindness?
Totally. And this brings us to another big part of this story. how it's presented. Like the title of the video, Tucker Carlson finds out his driver is homeless. What he does next will melt your heart. Come on. That's clearly trying to make you feel a certain way.
Oh, totally. It's that classic, like, rich guy saves the day story, you know?
Right. And it's heartwarming, sure. But we got to be careful about the story that's being told here.
Yeah, like, is this video really about Tucker Carlson being a good guy, or is it just, a way to make him look better to people?
Who knows? But it's worth thinking about how this whole thing fits into Tucker's image, right? Like, he's known for being kind of controversial, saying what he thinks, even if it upsets people.
So could this whole generous thing be a way to, like, soften his image, make him seem more relatable?
Maybe, maybe.
Huh.
And that brings up another question. Is it okay to use someone else's struggles, even if they say it's okay, to make yourself look better?
And it's not just about Tucker Carlson, right? Like, the video itself is getting views, likes, shares, all that. It's basically making money off this guy's story.
That's a huge point. It shows how we need to be smart about the media we consume.
Yeah.
Like, ask ourselves, who's benefiting from this story? What's the real message? And is there, like, exploitation going on?
These are questions we should be asking about everything we see and hear, not just viral videos.
And maybe the most important thing is that this story, it should make us do something. It's a reminder that we can all be part of making the world a better, kinder place.
That doesn't mean we all got to be like super rich philanthropists or activists or whatever. There are tons of ways to help, even small ones.
Right. Volunteering, donating to organizations that help homeless people, speaking up for policies that tackle poverty. There's so much we can do.
And sometimes it can be as simple as just seeing the person, like looking past their job, their situation, treating everyone with respect.
That's so important. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all connected, right? We all have a responsibility to make sure everyone has a chance to not just survive, but to really thrive.
So here's something to think about. What if each of us did one small act of kindness, like one gesture of compassion, one thing to make a difference?
Imagine if that, like, started a chain reaction. Generosity and empathy spreading everywhere, changing lives, changing the world.
That's something worth fighting for. And with that, we're wrapping up this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep digging.
I feel like we just scratched the surface here. We started with this feel-good video, and now we're having this, like, really deep conversation.
And that's kind of the whole point of these deep dives, right? Like, we see these little stories all the time, but there's always so much more going on underneath.
Yeah. It's like we're supposed to just feel something.
Right.
Happy, sad, inspired, whatever, and then move on to the next thing. But we don't really stop and think about the whole picture.
But this video, even if it was just meant to be, entertainment, it got people talking. And that's important, right? People are talking about homelessness, about empathy, about power, and how it works.
So zooming out a bit, what are some things our listeners can take away from all this?
I think a big one is that, like, being nice to people is great, but it doesn't fix the big problems. Yeah, like, we can't just rely on random acts of kindness to solve homelessness or poverty. We need real solutions. Affordable housing, healthcare, job training, mental health support, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that individual acts of kindness don't matter. They absolutely do. But they're not enough on their own.
And you made a great point earlier about, like, the stories we're told, right? We got to be careful about what we believe, especially with stuff we see online.
Oh, for sure. Especially now with social media where everything goes viral so fast, we have to ask ourselves, who's benefiting from this story? What's the message here? Is someone being taken advantage of?
We should be asking those questions about everything we see and hear, not just these viral videos.
And maybe the most important thing is that this story, it should make us want to do something. It's a reminder that we can all make a difference.
And like you said, we don't have to be, millionaires or activists or whatever. We can all do something.
Exactly. There are so many ways to help. Volunteering, donating, speaking up for people who need help. Every little bit counts.
And sometimes it can be as simple as, like, just seeing the person in front of you. Not their job, not their situation, just them. Treating everyone with respect.
That's so powerful because at the end of the day, we're all connected, right?
Yeah.
And we have to look out for each other, make sure everyone has a chance, not just to get by, but to really live a good life.
So here's something to think about. What if everyone listening just did one nice thing? Just one act of kindness, one thing to make a difference.
Imagine the impact that could have, right? Kindness, spreading, changing lives, changing the world. It's a pretty amazing thought.
It really is. And on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep asking questions and, keep digging.